Well, all right. Welcome to week 4 of From the Stands from the XFL Game Day edition. Today we have some fresh faces on here. We've got Rick, who's a newcomer. This is his first week with the show. And also we have Cam, who's been here for the last few weeks with us. So without further ado, I'd love for Rick to go ahead and introduce himself, and we'll get started with recaps for week 3 performances.
Yeah, it's Rick Rosen at the Rick Rosen. What's going on from the stands? Great to be with you guys. Seen a lot of great things from the first 3 weeks of the season and from college football season. And I'm here to bring some pep, some hot takes, and most importantly, some degenerate gambling advice to the show. So really glad to be here. Let's dig into week 3. The first game. You want to talk right about the first game?
Yeah, let's get into Houston Roughnecks at the Tampa Bay Vipers.
Well, it's really all about PJ Walker. You know, Jeff, is if there was an MVP trophy announced for the XFL, which there isn't at this point, it would be him. And his ability to remain calm in the pocket and extend plays is what really elevates Houston's play and makes them the best team in the XFL. Because, Cam, you agree, they're the best team in the league, right?
They are absolutely the best team in the league. I think really, but there's something I noticed that they defensively they don't hold teams a lot. Teams do tend to put up a lot of points against them. I think that showed with Tampa Bay today. They only won by a touchdown and a 1-point conversion. I think last week they only won by 4 points. So they're basically, their tactic so far appears to be, it doesn't matter if we can't defend. We will simply outscore you, and they have the weapons to do that. Jeff, what are your views on Houston, Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Houston's the real deal. I've liked them from week 1. They're exciting. They definitely have the offense. Their defense is definitely sufficient. They put up a lot of yards. You know, they led the league with 417 yards last week, and they've got the ability to score. So they do have a lot of ability in the red zone to actually complete drives, which I think really is an asset for them, where some other teams, they can drive down the field but can't seem to get the points on the board.
Let me get one more point in, Jeff, and then I'll move on
absolutely,
I'll start the next game. I think that there's something going on with the way Houston gets these explosive touchdowns. Their defense is on the field a lot, and they are putting opposing offenses in pass leverage situations. So the other team has to pass to get up in the game and is moving the ball, and that is a catalyst for more touchdowns and more points. But I agree that their inability to get a stop and really put teams away is super concerning, because both of their last 2 games have come down to the last drive. I'm gonna move right ahead to New York, St. Louis. Is that the game you want to talk about next?
Yeah, sure. We can go ahead and do that one. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Well, it's all about the home field advantage. We're gonna do Seattle, right?
Let's just do this. Dallas Renegades. Yeah, well, we can do it. Whatever. If you want to start off with that, that's fine. We do have the Dallas Renegades, the Seattle Dragons too.
Who doesn't like their eggs a little scrambled? Not the full but just a little mess in there. Maybe some cheese. Anyway, so the Battlehawks have the home field advantage, and it really didn't matter who they were playing in that game. It just happened to be the Guardians, who needed 3 quarterbacks just to finish the game. So I'll move to Cam. Do you think the Guardians need to get away from Matt McGloin in week 4?
Get away, and then where do you go? You get away from Matt McGloin, then you've got a guy who also can't do anything. So,
well, Marquise Williams, he started ahead of Trubisky at North Carolina. I think if he gets some run, the key is the dual threat quarterback. As we've seen in this league, the quarterbacks that can manipulate the pocket and hang around are the ones that will have the long-term value. And Jeff, you've noted Jordan Ta'amu, that's what he does best.
Absolutely. That's what I really see with all these quarterbacks, is the dual threat, because the lines are still young and immature, and it's easier to be disruptive on the defensive line than it is to be cohesive with the offensive line. So you're seeing quarterbacks that can move. They're a little mobile. Cardell Jones, despite his week 3 struggles, certainly PJ Walker's been the quintessential. And then you've got Jordan Ta'amu. All of these have the ability to scramble and deliver downfield. They're not just drop back pro style passers. What do you think about that, Cam?
Yeah, I think that's definitely. I think it's something we're seeing in the NFL a lot more, with Lamar Jackson quite literally running away with nearly the league, but definitely a highlight player. I think it's definitely in what the XFL is aiming to do with this, rock and roll football, heavy hits, fast pace, a player who can do everything in that sort of key role is definitely what's going to win you a championship and get you noticed.
Absolutely. With that, I think we're going to move on to the Dallas Renegades at Seattle Dragons. What do you think, Cam?
I think it's Landry Jones' second performance. I think we saw a lot more of the Landry Jones that people saw in college. That got him noticed by the NFL. Still a few kinks to work out, but he looks a lot better than he did week two. Seattle, I think, have plateaued a little bit. They looked like they were on the ascendancy in terms of putting up points and making plays, and they kind of lagged a little bit this week. Rick, what do you think of that one?
Well, I think in that matchup, you saw a good example of one quarterback elevating his team's play in Landry Jones and another quarterback bringing his team down in Brandon Silvers. Silvers has, according to Pro Football Focus, the worst deep ball accuracy in XFL. And that's a big problem for the Dragons, who have a reasonably balanced attack. They have a good three-headed monster at running back with Kenneth Farrow, I think, the best of the bunch. And they have good receivers in Prohl and Reynolds, but they're not finding him the ball. So I'd like to see BJ Daniels in there, who's a little more inconsistent in the short to intermediate, but can shuck that deep ball, because that's what they need going forwards. But
Yeah.
do you think that, Jeff, do you think Seattle's a playoff contender? Because Cam's right, they've been up and down the first couple weeks.
If they weren't in the West, I think that's a
Yeah,
possibility. But I
same.
have a tough time being in the West and saying you got the Roughnecks and the Renegades
Mm-hmm.
and even the Wildcats. I mean, I could see the Wildcats even sneaking into that mix. The Dragons just probably a little too late. They're just a little underpowered to compete with those kind of names.
Yeah. Speaking of the Wildcats, they closed out week 3 with probably the most surprising result of the weekend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So DC Defenders at the LA Wildcats, the game that I haven't found anybody that picked LA to win yet. And
Nobody.
certainly, I considered picking the upset for fun or saying maybe, and I didn't pull the trigger. So no points for me. I still lost with everyone else. What do you got to say about that one there, Rick?
Well, I think that Cardale Jones crashed back down to earth. He was looking really good the first few weeks and had a 4 interception performance for the ages. And that really made things a lot easier for LA, because Josh Johnson got to sit back and pick apart a tired DC defense. I don't know if the cross country flight, played in the hands, but it's not like these guys are flying first class. So maybe a little don't have their legs onto them. I expect LA to maybe get a taste of their own medicine of that coming back to New York this week, but we'll get to that. But Josh Johnson is an NFL quarterback, and when he gets time and he has explosive weapons, he can make things happen. But the real interesting piece was Martez Carter, who was filling in at running back for LA, finally getting majority of snap shares. He looked explosive, a possible Tariq Cohen type player that could really give the Wildcats a really important extra dimension moving forward.
Absolutely. And Cam, what are your views on that one, real quickly?
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to bring up is Carter he was literally head over heels into the end
Nice.
zone, around the end zone. I thought when I was watching the game that he scored 3 touchdowns, but it only lists 2 here. But yeah, he is like I said, he's a lightning in a bottle player, someone who can just become electric and change a game with a play. He was really impressive. I think LA they look like a very complete team this week. I don't know if like you said, Rick, that cross country travel in DC maybe made it a lot easier for them. But I think how you said they go over to New York, maybe they'll get taste of the medicine. I don't know. I think this was a good if DC were really that tired and made it easy on them, I think this was a good run out for them. Then I think they maybe won't find it as hard going to New York as DC found it going to LA. But like Rick said, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, well, underage beer here says Cardale went full on poop emoticon last week, and I
Nice.
think that's our view. Speaking of which,
Speaking of poop,
LA. Speaking of which, LA dumped
oh,
their defensive coordinator in what we might call a sell. We're going to do our next segment is called buy or sell. So our first question for the hosts here is Kenny Robinson, who came up from the college ranks and is taking a potentially alternative path to the NFL or at least even just the XFL. Uh, Rick, are you buying or selling Kenny Robinson in this new model that he might be the pioneer of?
this is the biggest buy of all time. Like, there's no bigger buy for the XFL than Kenny Robinson. This is a player who left after his sophomore year of school because his mom got cancer, has the only player in the XFL with college eligibility remaining. The XFL is paying for him to get college credits. He is still going to school and he is working professionally. Think about this. If you're in college, right? You're an English major. You can write a book and get money and stay in school. If you're a music major, you can start a band and make money and stay in school. But if you play running back, you are part of the college's multi-billion-dollar machine and you are shackled by those rights. You absolutely deserve to get paid for your talents. And if Kenny Robinson can shine in the XFL and potentially make a jump to the NFL or even be a star in his own right, make endorsements, plugging his social media in the XFL, this is going to be so viable and blow the lid off the league, Cam.
I agree. I think the potential is there for it to be this very viable, solid pathway to what is the premier level of the sport. But at the same time, I think at this point, the ball is in the NFL's court because it's their choice if they want to pick him up out of the XFL or out of college if he chooses to go and declare for the draft at any point. I'm not 100% sure how it works. I'm British. I
Right.
don't know every intricacy. But
All right. Well, I think Rick, he's definitely sold me on that. So I think we're in agreement here. So I'm just going to move along and say Tampa Bay Vipers, buying or selling? Are they showing a little more life? Are we buying or selling? Are they on the upswing or are they still in the basement?
Well, Jeff, if I were the Houston Astros, I would be buying the Tampa Vipers because they're what's known as a distressed asset, right? They are on the cheap. I'm finding them in the dumpster bin, cleaning them up, shining them up, and I think that this team has talent. I just think the problem with Tampa this year is they got off on the wrong foot and there's not enough games in the season to recover. And we didn't mention this in the segment. Quentin Flowers left the team today. Quentin Flowers is no longer with the Vipers, and that is just absolutely devastating for the way that their offense can be more dynamic. It's Murray or bust, and Murray has been replaceable, sufficient, maybe. Cam, do you think Aaron Murray can solve any of the problems when he comes back?
Well, no, because this thing's like, if you'd have asked me when was it, like Tuesday before Quentin Flowers left, I would say Tampa, buy, buy, buy. Because
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you put him in their offense, we've seen these past 3 weeks they have been churning out yards
Yes.
and then getting to the red zone and almost hitting like a brick wall. It's almost like they find it impossible to get the ball over the line. But when you put Quentin Flowers there, they're scoring points, they're finishing off drives. And now he's gone. You kind of look at it and go, well, now you're back to like how you were week 1, week 2, except the fact that you've got no Flowers. You can't even bring him in off the bench. You're just getting loads of yards and then not putting points up. So I'm thinking now, do you sell? Because it's a lot more uncertain looking.
Yeah.
With Quentin Flowers, I'm a buy, but with Quentin Flowers declaring sell, I'm gonna agree with him and sell just like you.
So, he said, "You really think Tyler Cornelius is better than me?" Deuces.
That's right. All right, and that brings us to another quarterback, Cardale Jones. Cam, buying or selling?
Ooh, this is an interesting one. This man is 6'5". Like he could just throw a screen pass just by standing there. You don't need to jump or even try. Just dot it to a bloke. But I think this past week against LA showed that he can have a bad game. And when he has a bad game, he has a very just offense killing bad game. But I think what he has proven is that he more often than not is a reliable quarterback. If you're looking at buying or selling, I would say, I'm going to say sell because he's coming up next week against a Tampa Bay offense that we're going to put up points. And I kind of like the look at Tampa Bay's defense. They have some decent looking secondaries that if he has, again, some of the slip ups in the reads that he did this week, could kill him. So I'm going to say sell on Cardale Jones. Rick, what do you think of that one?
Well, I think the interesting question with Cardale Jones is, does lowering his basement lower his ceiling? Because we saw Cardale's basement. It is Zero, below zero. It is sub-zero, no Mortal Kombat. Literally giving the game to the other team. But does that lower his ceiling for you? How good could he possibly be on his best day? And I don't think it does. And to counter your point with Tampa, they have one of the lowest rated secondaries, if not the lowest rated secondary in the XFL. According to Pro Football Focus, they have a number of guys in the most yards allowed per passing attempt in their secondary. So this is a spot where Cardale Jones can absolutely get right, get back on his feet, lift his spirits, because he's still a very young quarterback, young in his professional career. So what's really important is, does he have a short memory? So I'm going to buy Cardale Jones. I don't like that he's not as mobile as some of these other XFL quarterbacks, but in terms of pure pocket passer, he's the best by far. Wouldn't you agree, Jeff?
Well, I think he is a good pocket passer, and he does have some good ability to see down the field. The only thing is that I believe that some of the defenses are catching on to him, because
Yeah.
I felt like in the first couple of weeks his passing's fairly accurate, all told, but he does leave some balls out there. You're going, well, that should be picked off. The numbers and the averages finally caught up to the guy. I don't think he's at all a bad quarterback, and I'm not a seller of Cardale Jones. Um, he's still going to be one of the top quarterbacks. I know Will's saying he's a buy on Cornelius here, one of our viewers, for the Vipers. But for me, I'm saying
You
I'm a
giving this a
push
hold
basically.
rating? No buy,
It's a
no
hold
sell,
for
a
me. It's
hold
a hold.
rating.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to ask one final one here on our buy sell, and we're going to wrap this segment. It's going to be buying or selling the LA Wildcats. What do you think, Rick?
Give me that. Give me Martez Carter. Give me the NFL. This is the NFL quarterback. Josh Johnson has won games at the highest level of football. So if Josh Johnson is healthy, which is the biggest ask, so this is a caveat. This is couched heavily with the health of Josh Johnson. But what a story for the defense. We made fun of this defense aggressively after firing the defensive coordinator, and they absolutely dismantled the DC offense. So can they keep it going? This is a big test for them. It's not about the teams you beat, it's about the teams you're supposed to beat, right? So this is a game where LA is supposed to roll. Will they play down to their opponent on the road, early start, first game of the weekend, off the hype? This is a trap game by traditional NFL standards. So I am buying LA. I think they can go on the road and beat anybody because they have the best quarterback, and that's just how the league works. That's how the sport works, really.
So you'd take the LA Wildcats over the Houston Roughnecks then?
In LA, yes, but I know the championship is in Houston, and Houston's looking at home field advantage. But we could talk more about Houston, our Week 4 preview,
Sure.
because I
Sure.
think they do have all the pieces.
Definitely. Okay, Cam, quick 2 sentences. Buy or sell?
Buy. I love Martez Carter. I agree
Yeah.
with Rick. Josh Johnson, great standard
He's
quarterback.
head over heels for Carter.
Yeah, that is correct. Thank you for quoting my own line back to me. I think just a quick thing, the coaching. I think when we said about the firing, when they fired the defensive coordinator, we're all laughing at them. I think it's come back and proven that they have ambitions to be one of the best teams in this league. They saw something that wasn't working and said, right, we need change. And that's what they've done. And I think behind closed doors, that's what they've done with the coaching without firing people on the offensive side of the ball. But that's what they've done. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's certainly been interesting to watch them go from the supposed, we don't think this team has the leadership, but they have the talent, based on some of the tumult in the week 1 or week 2 there. But for the rest of us here, for our fans, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe down below and click that bell to get notified when we put out a new show. Also, feel free to check out our website, www.fromthestands.us, that is .us, not .com, for extra coverage, and follow us on Twitter at FromTheStandsUS. We'll be tweeting throughout all the games each week with highlights, commentary, and any other good stuff we come across. With that, Rick, the XFL versus AAF, we got ticket sales and viewership numbers. Do you have any takes on those?
Well, I think it's interesting the way the XFL staggered their home openers. They went the first 3 weeks of the season with home openers every week. That was heavily calculated, and this will be the first week where you won't have a home opener. So you're going to see a drop in attendance. But for me, it's all about that second media contract. Getting to that second media contract while showing you have a viable product is the key to the XFL's future financial success. And leaning on gambling is going to help that. So, Cam, my question for you is, do you think that the broadcast networks are doing enough to put the XFL out to try to make this a viable product? And do you think the XFL ratings are going to stay up this season? Because it's already outrating like afternoon basketball in the US.
Well, I say I can't speak for the US in terms of broadcast ratings, but in the UK, every game is broadcast. It's got its own sort of, you know, well, I'll call it, it's like a screensaver. If you're watching in the UK and you watch the games, then you know what I'm talking about. But US, it's like a screensaver. It's something they use to fill time between
But are the ratings there? Like, is the
the
excitement
ratings.
there?
I have noticed a lot of people who are fans of the NFL in the UK transition over to the XFL and
We love
stick with
that.
the XFL. I think there was something very interesting that when the NFL, the official NFL UK Twitter account put out something when the season, after the Super Bowl or whatever, saying, "Oh, we're sad. There's no more NFL for several months," and then every single reply was like, "You know damn well that there is professional football being played.
That's
You
awesome.
just don't want to admit it." But I see
Hell
a
yeah.
lot of embracing of the XFL. Sorry, over here. I think it's a great time for the XFL to buy into these overseas markets. But
Yeah.
they're staggering the sort of international stuff, which I think is wise. Just get a footing domestically before you blow stuff out of the water overseas.
Yeah. Well, certainly, if we're talking about Cam over there broadcasting live at nearly 3 a.m. local time, I think you're getting some excitement out of the out of Britain for sure. Uh, we're going to get into our power rankings here. So, without further ado, we'll pull these numbers up because we have a staff power ranking to share with you.
Let's go.
Yeah. So we'll see if we get that up on the screen
That's
here.
electric.
We got it. We got a graphic here.
Guardians
All
up
right.
top.
There we go. We do. All right. So in the East, who do we got here? We've got St. Louis at number 1, the DC Defenders at number 2, Tampa Bay Vipers at number 3, and New York has slipped all the way down to number 4, who actually defeated the Tampa Bay Vipers in week 1. So they've certainly been on the downtrend. Out in the West, we've got number 1, Houston, number 2, Dallas, number 3, LA, and number 4, Seattle. So we've got a big matchup coming up here, actually, with Houston and Dallas this week. So number 1 versus number 2, our view in the West. With that, I'm going to shoot on over and talk about our week 4 preview. And I'm going to lead that off with Rick. Sorry to kind of knock through those power ratings quickly, but wanted to move that along a little for our fans. Our first game up, we've got the LA Wildcats at the New York Guardians. What do you think, Rick?
Well, the thing about the New York Guardians is they're not very good at football, Jeff. And this is football and it's important to learn. But no, the way I talked about this is LA going East Coast is a potential trap. I'm not aware of the facilities or what kind of travel expenditures. So I don't think that LA is going to necessarily get there, early. It does affect you more when you go east to west than vice versa. But New York is desperate, and the hungrier team usually comes out strong. The problem is New York doesn't have a functional quarterback. But there's one key that we have not talked about. New York has 2 rushers that have double-digit pressures on the season, including Kevon Butler, who's a D tackle. He's got 11 pressures. And if you want to get ahead against an NFL ready quarterback, you want to beat the best quarterback, you have to generate pressure, and you can generate the most effective pressure right up the middle. So if the Guardians are able to swarm Josh Johnson, and they have had strong pass rush at times this season, they have a puncher's chance at winning this game, but they also have no shot because they're not good on offense. You know what I'm saying, Cam? It's like they have a chance, but they don't.
Yeah, it's like you're playing the game of football, but
Oh,
are you in the game of football?
not
It's
fun.
like I say, it's something I said about St. Louis is that now Montez Carter's suddenly playing football.
Yeah.
They have something that is almost like a secret weapon in the XFL, which is a run game.
They
And
don't have the
I've noticed now that teams are beginning to really feel out how they're going to use their run game. The defenses can get run over very quickly in the XFL. I think now LA has well, I wouldn't say strong, but a lightning, like something that can make plays running with the ball. I think it just makes New York's struggles worse in terms of this game. It's just like I said, they're in the fixture, but they're not really in the fixture.
So you like LA?
I like LA.
So LA is a 7.5 point favorite with a total spread of a 39.5. That's a really small number. Do you think that can go over the total of 39.5 despite New York's offensive troubles?
Well, hell, LA put up 39 points
It's true.
all
So
against
the over's a
DC.
good bet.
I think over is a solid bet. I'm not a gambling man terribly myself, but
All right, Jeff. Well, there you go. We like LA and we like the over 39.5.
Yeah.
I saw you
Yeah,
had a
we're
nice little
taking up.
cameo. You keep it moving.
Yeah, I'm up there. I picked LA as well to win. And we're gonna go ahead. So we got 3 picks for LA, I think. Is that correct? And next game is up on our radar is the Seattle Dragons at the St. Louis Battlehawks. So I do actually before I transition, I do want to say that body clock thing is possibly an issue, but I don't think despite the fact that it'll be 11 a.m. LA Wildcats time, I don't think that's too early for those players. So anyway, back to Seattle Dragons at the St. Louis Battlehawks. Rick.
You're gonna talk. Or
Cam, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Cam. You got it. That was my fault. Host failure.
It's
That's
okay.
fine.
I think the issue here, we're going back to the Dome a second week in a row, so it's gonna get loud. It's gonna be really tough for Seattle. I think one of the biggest matchups is Seattle. They're vulnerable through the air, through their secondary. They have a strong run defense, but that's not what St. Louis does. They're RPO heavy. They run short routes, short passing routes, and maybe we see Jordan Tamu open it up. I don't think we do. I think it's going to be strength against strength, and they're going to grind it out. And that's why this game has an even lower total of 38.5. The difference is St. Louis is a huge 12-point favorite in the Dome. So, Cam, do you think that St. Louis is 12 points better than Seattle, and can Seattle cover that big number?
I think they have the potential, especially to be 12 points better than Seattle.
Yeah.
I think especially with John Tiamo. People who have watched the XFL show since week 1 know I love John Tiamo. You can go back and rewatch week 1 if you want me to say his full Polynesian name. I'm not going to recite it here. It's long. But I love John Tiamo. I think he has the ability to blow out a team by himself. But like I said, run game, St. Louis has arguably now the best run game in the XFL, and they could possibly, they could run over anybody. It's that good. But I think in the Dome, against a Seattle team that is now becoming very stagnant offensively, I think they have the win, and I think they definitely could just outscore them, if not outplay them. Yeah. So I think that 12-point is definitely potential, and I think the 38.5, you could go over. I'm not sure on that.
I think we're going to see a pretty defensive matchup with 2 mostly running games. I mean, certainly St. Louis has shown the ability to whip the ball around too. But just for fun, I'm picking Seattle in this game because who knows? Maybe their defense can show up and get it done. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair personally, which brings us to
Seattle can't throw the ball deep, and St. Louis doesn't want to.
There you go. That's exactly about right. And both of them don't have a lot of snap counts. They each stay in the lower part of the league.
That's going to be a grindy game. That's a great note for the underman. That is actually a really good nugget.
Yeah. So that brings us to the Houston Roughnecks at the Dallas Renegades, which is probably the premier matchup of the entire weekend.
Yeah.
What do you think, Rick?
We got my guns out for the Texas Showdown. It's
There
got an
you go.
over-under of 50.5. That's the XFL totals that I'm looking for. That's XFL football. Houston is a 1-point favorite, which is one of those lines where if you don't know any better, you just think that you just want to slam Houston and you're not sure why the line is so close. But in this point, I kind of agree because listen, Landry Jones, is he an upper echelon pocket passer? Yes. Is he mobile in the vein of all the quarterbacks that are having success in the XFL? Absolutely not. And nobody is racking up more quarterback pressures than the Houston Roughnecks. I think they have 4 players in the top 7 of people with double digit or 7 or more pass rushers. So they get after the quarterback, like we said